Tonight on Need to Know, when it comes to mental health, some in our community are suffering in silence. Why it's happening and the types of solutions that can lead to care and healing. That story is coming up next. Also on the show, the 2016 presidential election proved campaign rhetoric is more than simply phrases used by candidates to sway voters. We'll learn how gender and race in that historic election influenced our current political climate and how we can change it. Stay with us. Need to Know starts right now. It's been said that mental illness doesn't discriminate, but some say mental health care systems do. Dr. Altha Stewart, president of the American Psychiatric Association, founded in 1844, is in Rochester this week to talk health equity for those some refer to as the silent sufferers. I'm talking about communities of color where conversations about mental illness are taboo and access to care is limited. Dr. Stewart recently joined me at the WXXI studios prior to her presentation for the Mental Health Association's Healing for the Village. The focus of the day-long summit is to work on creating community-led, culturally responsive approaches to mental healing. Dr. Stewart, I understand that working in the public sector for you is pretty much like working in the family business. You are from Memphis, your parents, your siblings all worked in the public sector, government jobs in Memphis. Also, your mother worked at the public library system. So this was a natural fit for you, what you're doing now. And I want to know, how has the family business, so to speak, given you a deeper understanding of the disparities that exist in our country, in particular when it comes to the healthcare system?
Well, when you're working in the family business, as it were, which is public service, you become keenly aware of the fact that for many people, service is exactly what they need. And in the healthcare arena, specifically mental health, there's so many people in need of mental health care, from young children who are having behavioral challenges that are impairing their ability to remain in school, to older people who are perhaps starting to suffer early signs of dementia and not able to live on their own and having challenges with depression and isolation, to everyone in between. And so for me, working in the family business, as it were, means that I've worked in the public sector my entire life. My professional career has been solely in the public sector, and I've seen every aspect of that system up close and personal, unfortunately, and I know that it does not meet the service needs of the individuals that we want to help.
Talk to me a little bit about that, because I've heard it said a number of times, mental illness does not discriminate. Mental health care systems do. Explain a little bit about that to me. I mean, how is this happening, and do we know, are we able to get to the root of why these disparities exist?
We know a lot about why they exist. What we're not as good at is figuring out how to reduce them or remove them altogether. We know they exist because people, particularly disenfranchised, marginalized people, people of color, poor people, people who live in certain zip codes, we know they don't have the kind of access to care. We know they don't get the kind of quality care. We know they don't often understand how the system works, and therefore they're not able to navigate as well as some others might. We know they don't have access to the funds to provide them with a level of care that public services just don't provide sometimes. And we also know that in many communities, particularly racial and ethnic minority communities, there is a stigma attached to being mentally ill that is almost as bad as, if not worse, than the stigma associated with being that racial or ethnic minority.
I know you've said this, we have to dispel the myth that mental illness doesn't happen in the Black community. We are suffering in silence. Talk to me a little bit about how the general conversation on mental health in our nation differs from the conversation taking place in the Black community.
Well, in the Black community, there is a sense of a taboo. If you are mentally ill, It is often said that you simply don't have enough faith, or that you're not right with God, or you've done something horrible and you're being punished, or you don't have time to be crazy. We made it through slavery. How can we get depressed? Or that's a white person's illness. Black people don't get depressed. They don't commit suicide. The reality, unfortunately, is that we have all of those illnesses and we do all of those things that are harmful to our health and well-being. The tragedy is that we are losing people at record rates to suicide, to depression, to treatable and preventable illnesses because of our refusal to acknowledge that it does happen in the Black community, that we do suffer from these problems, and that we can be treated. One of the most refreshing things I hear today is finally the dialogue around Black people get mental illness, but they can also be helped. There are young people out there. Charlemagne the God is on a book tour about his own anxiety disorder.
A radio speaker and presenter.
Yes, and we thought, some of us in the profession thought, when Don King committed suicide, Don Cornelius committed suicide, Soul Train, everyone grew up on that. We all knew that. We thought, finally we're going to have this discussion. It didn't happen. Young people are committing suicide. We're not talking about it. We have got to break the silence. It is killing us if we don't begin to talk about this.
I want to know, in terms of health equity and how we can address these things that you just mentioned, what does healthcare equity look like? And I mean that, what does it look like when it comes to mental illness, mental health care, in particular for the Black community?
It means simply that wherever I am, if I have a problem or someone thinks I have a problem, before I do something tragic and harmful to myself or someone else, I have the ability, because I'm now armed with information, understanding of what the needs of my situation are, and the ability to make an informed decision about what I need. It means that I can go and get the help that I need, that I've got access, that I've got availability, that I've got people who are able to respond to my specific need within a context that is sensitive to my cultural approach to life and getting help. That all of those factors being equal, that I can get the help that I need, just like anybody else. That my zip code does not dictate my health status.
How can we make that happen in a community like Rochester? How do we create culturally responsive approaches to care and healing for mental illness? And this is really the focus of this week's Healing for the Village Summit that you will be speaking at. What are some realistic things, goals that we can attain as a community to make that happen?
Healthcare providers partnering with the community around real need and real solutions to meeting those needs. Training institutions becoming much more culturally aware of the needs of the population they serve and addressing them in a culturally responsive, appropriate, and sensitive way. Communities being willing to learn and engage in this whole practice of working with providers and not standing back waiting for something to happen. Taking the risk that if I sit at the table, I'm in a much better position to help shape the response, and being willing to stay in it for the long haul.
And how does that work in particular for teenagers? I know this is an area of focus for you in terms of teenagers that are dealing with trauma.
Us adults have to become much more aware of how young people are using social media as their treatment outlet. Kids are talking on Instagram and Snapchat and other social media platforms about very important and dangerous things: suicide, feeling suicidal, being bullied and not knowing what to do about it, having eating disorders or cutting disorders or other things that are impacting their ability to live healthy, whole, productive lives. We adults have got to get much more aware of these things as they are happening. We've got to become familiar with the technology so that we can appropriately interact on those things. And then we've got to teach people of that age group how to have these conversations also with their peers.
When it comes to mental health care and communities of color, how also can faith-based communities, schools, employers, even local government also get involved and have a seat at the table in terms of helping to bridge some of these barriers that have existed for so long?
Communities have to create champions. There've got to be people in all of those segments of the population that you just described who are willing to be there at the table as the champion for the community. They represent a respective area, but their common thread in the whole dialogue ought to be, I represent this community first and foremost. I'm a part of this community first and foremost. I care about this community first and foremost, and I want what's best for this community. And if everybody is in agreement at the table on those things, we can get some things done.
There's something that you said in an article that was really interesting to me, and you said the brain needs to be seen as another organ like the heart, the lungs, the spleen. You said if I come in for an operation on those organs, no one tells me to pray that condition away. And that kind of goes back to when you're talking about stigmas that might exist in the Black community. Explain what you mean by that and how changing our perspective when we look at the brain and mental health care can also impact how we treat this issue.
We would never say to someone who's having a heart attack, just don't worry, just go home, it'll be okay. We can't legally put you in the hospital because you're not a danger to yourself or others. We say that every day to people who come in mental health crisis. We've got to change the narrative around how we view mental illness, what we say to people who are mentally ill or are presenting with symptoms that may suggest a mental illness. And we've got to do a much better job of educating the entire public that mental illnesses are real. Effective treatments are available, but you have to be willing to accept them, and you got to understand that you need them.
That was Dr. Altha Stewart, president of the American Psychiatric Association. If you have questions or need access to support and treatment for mental illness, there are a number of services in our community that can help. You can start by reaching out to the Mental Health Association at 585-325-3188. You can also learn more on their website, mharochester.org.
Nobody knows the system better than me. I alone can fix it.
I'm going to close my campaign focused on opportunities for kids and fairness for families.
Hillary failed on the economy. Everything she touched didn't work out. Nothing.
Even if you're totally opposed to Donald Trump, you may still have some questions about me.
It's fairly easy to recall some of the rhetoric that dominated the 2016 presidential election. Nasty women, deplorables, and bad hombres are just a few of the phrases that characterize an historic election that people are still talking about. A new book, edited by 3 professors from RIT, are examining the impact of such figures of speech and how gender and racial politics were front and center in the 2016 presidential election. 2 of the editors of the book, Nasty Women and Bad Hombres, join me now to explain how we got to this political moment and what it could mean for 2020. Tamar Carroll, Associate Professor of History, and Hinda Mandel, Associate Professor in the School of Communication, both from RIT. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
So from the title of the book alone, Nasty Women and Bad Hombres, some people may immediately question, if this is a book with a slanted viewpoint and if it's intended to paint Donald Trump in a negative light and to further some type of a message about a liberal message or a feminist message. So I want to know, is that the point, or are you trying to do something different? I'll give that to you, Tamar.
Okay, so it's an interdisciplinary women's and gender studies-based volume. So we're trying to take a critical analysis, a lens of critical analysis to better understand what happened. So it's about understanding why Donald Trump used words like nasty women and bad hombres. It's using feminist tools to help us understand why those words have particular resonance with voters today.
Did you want to add to that, Hinda?
Sure. So if we go back in time to the 2016 presidential election, this was the first time that we had a woman, spearheading a major party ticket. And so she had to envision a new presidential femininity. This was a completely new opportunity. And at the same time, we have Donald Trump, who is embodying masculinity, but not just a traditional masculinity, like a really strong alpha aggressive masculinity where he was hearkening back to, like, you know, the good old days of the 1950s. So, you know, with this clash of gender and identity, it provoked very strong reactions among the candidates and among the population. So this is an opportunity to explore that intensity.
It's interesting. You write in the book, and when I say you, I mean all the editors, the three of you. You wrote, whether the result would be the first female president or the first brutish president, the 2016 election was a contest between different visions of proper gender behavior. A very interesting point to make.
Yeah, so we found that there was a lot of misogyny directed at Hillary Clinton, and when we use that term, we mean not just hatred of women, but hatred of women who step out of traditional femininity. And so because she was taking on this position that had long been reserved for men, she faced a lot of criticism for that, and we saw that in Donald Trump's attacks on her, calling her a nasty woman, but on a lot of internet memes and T-shirts and bumper stickers, just criticism directed at her because she was a woman.
Was there this light bulb moment, either, let's say, during the campaign or after the inauguration of Donald Trump, when the three of you said, we have to put this book together? There is much more to unpack that we want to explain to the American public.
Our co-editor, Christine Cray, actually came up with the idea, and it was because of watching the pilgrimages to Susan B. Anthony's grave during the election. She was really interested, as an anthropologist, in understanding what that ritual meant. Why, so before this, very small numbers of people had gathered at the grave, and all of a sudden there were thousands of people waiting in line for hours. And so Christine was really interested in exploring that, and she invited us to join her in the project.
Well, we have a soundbite, actually, from Election Day 2016 at the gravesite of Susan B. Anthony. We spoke to people in line to kind of get a bit of an idea of what that day meant for them, and we'll take a look at that right now.
It's just incredible to be here. Think about 100 years ago, Susan B. Anthony was fighting for our right to vote.
This was important, and the fact that she's right here in Rochester is really important.
I was blown away when I just biked in today, and just to see this line wrapping around. I don't know how many people are here.
Well, I feel very privileged today because I was off for work today, so I'm very excited about that. I was very excited to participate in the festivities of today, and it's just so important today, especially with the possibility of the potential first woman president tomorrow.
I think she would be ecstatic to see all these people here today, especially all the women thanking her for helping us get the right to vote.
I mean, I just, as see my shirt, part of the LGBT community, so for sure, for me, this is a vote to keep equal rights. I don't want to move back to a country where, you know, it was black and white. I want to move to a country where, you know, as Hillary said, stronger together. So basically, my vote is just basically to hopefully, everyone can work their differences.
In addition to gender, race, another big focus of this book. In particular, you talk about the intersection between race and gender in the 2016 presidential election. Hinda, explain that just a little bit. How did these two things intersect, and why is it important to understand what that means?
Sure. So I get emotional watching those clips. It's still very resonant. So regarding gender and race, sometimes we tend to think of people as a block, the woman's vote. I mean, what does that mean? We expected, you know, women as hordes to vote, you know, en masse for Hillary Clinton, but bodies are gendered and they're racialized all the time, and we see the breakdown, particularly with the 2016 presidential election. For instance, 52% of white women voted for Donald Trump. A majority of white women voted for Donald Trump. Another statistic is that 94% of African American women voted for Hillary Clinton, and almost 70% of Latino women voted also for Hillary Clinton. So we see that there is a breakdown in terms of how people voted based on different identity markers.
when it comes to intersectionality, there was a powerful essay in the book written by Barbara Winslow titled, "Please Put Stickers on Shirley Chisholm's Grave." So Chisholm, the first black woman elected to Congress in '68, the first woman and first African American to launch a campaign for the Democratic Party nomination for U.S. presidency. The author notes the significant differences between Chisholm's campaign and Clinton's campaign, and she writes that Chisholm's story reveals how different our political culture would be if women of color suffragists and feminists were put front and center of the historical narrative. In what ways do you think our political culture would be different if we did as the author suggested?
Well, Chisholm was really focused on making things better for all Americans in her campaign. So she was focused on, for example, eradicating child poverty. And I think if we recall her memory and what her goals were, it might shift the meter today and enable us to again focus on making things better for all Americans.
Well, another topic of the book was the myth of immigrant criminality. And this was really created by Donald Trump when he promised during the campaign to build this big, beautiful wall, meaning bordering Mexico. And it was reported quite a bit that he misused data about criminal offenses in terms of undocumented immigrants. Have we learned, can we learn in this book, I know we can, maybe you can explain it, why those who supported Donald Trump, that really seemed to resonate with them. They seemed to connect with this notion that immigrants increase crime.
There seems to be a conception that there's a finite pie, and that if some people's lives improve, that means that other people's lives have to become more difficult. And I don't personally believe with that. I like the late Minnesota Senator Paul Wellstone's saying that we all do better when we all do better. But I'm also, comfortably middle class, and I think there is a lot of uncertainty today relating to jobs and relating to economics and fear of the unknown, and therefore we other people who seem like they are coming to take what is ours.
I think you're absolutely right, Hinda, and I'd also add that there's a chapter in our book by Joshua Martin that looks at these long-standing tropes in American history and literature that frame Mexican immigrants in particular as threats to white women, as sexual predators. And Donald Trump drew on that when he called them bad hombres. And it resonates because there's a history of actually false accusations against African American men and Latino men that have been accused of raping white women. And so people are subconsciously attuned to that and more likely to believe that men of color are criminals, even though the facts don't bear that out.
There's a story in this book, and I mentioned, Hinda, you stood in line. You said it was still emotional to see that clip of those standing in line at the gravesite of Susan B. Anthony. You were there that day, expectant and anxious like many others that we heard from, and you were certain that our country would elect its first female president. What people likely don't know is you were also very pregnant that day, and you gave birth on Election Day. And you write in your book, we didn't expect to give birth to Election Day, Eddie. Your essay was moving, and it was about a powerful family legacy, Election Day and birth. And I want to know, how do you want your story to play kind of this larger role in this story working to change our political culture?
So I was due to have a baby a week after the election, so it didn't occur to me that I would have a baby on Election Day. But the stars aligned, and it seemed like there is this weight. What will be my son's legacy? But also wanting him, he's now exactly 2 years old, to have his own choice to create his own future. But I come from a liberal suburban Jewish background, and different family members have been very, very active in the civil rights movement. So it just seemed like when he was born that day, that he would be this perfect kumbaya baby. And I say that as a good thing. But he actually came into this world literally as the electoral map was turning red in favor of Donald Trump. And it was just too overwhelming for me because I believed, you know, due to the polls, they showed that, you know, Hillary Clinton had this for a lock. It just didn't occur to me that he would be born under a Trump presidency. It was supposed to be, you know, he was conceived, you know, when we had our first African-American president, and then, you know, born on the day of when the first woman president was elected. So it made me think, though, about all the other babies who were born, who had, you know, different color skin than him. And I remember walking down the hall in Highland Hospital after he was born, and, you know, they have all these stock images of babies of all different colors of the human rainbow, and just, again, getting very emotional about what's their life going to be like.
I want to know, you know, as we look at this book and we kind of start to wrap our conversation, how do you hope that Nasty Women and Bad Hombres, how do you hope people of all backgrounds will, and all political affiliations that are eager to change our current narrative, how do you hope that this book will enable them to do just that?
Well, I hope that some of the analytical frameworks and tools will help them so that they can analyze rhetoric that they encounter in their daily lives. But also we document a long history of activism by women, and particularly women of color. And so we hope that they'll be inspired to continue that.
And how do you see in the writing and from the different journalists and academics, how do you also see that kind of better positioning people to be informed when it comes to the 2020 election?
So this book, we take pride in the fact that this book is written in a really accessible way. Yeah. The majority of contributors are scholars, but we also do include, you know, writers and essayists and journalists because it was such a personal event. We wanted them to be able to convey the personal experiences that they went through.
Well, I want to make sure we have time for this, though. Conference at RIT, March 28th and 29th, featuring a number of the contributors of this book. Tamar, what's going to happen on that date? Yeah, so the conference is free and open to the public, and we'll have contributors as well as other scholars giving essays. The name of the conference is The Uses and Abuses of History in the Trump Era. There's a conference website, and we've just learned that local resident and investigative journalist David K. Johnson is going to be available to speak there as well. And the website? It's Uses and Abuses of History. Uses and Abuses of History in the Trump Era at RIT. Very good. All right, unfortunately we are out of time, but a huge thank you to my guests, Tamar Carroll and Hinda Mandel, for joining me today. Nasty Women and Bad Hombres is on sale now. You can get a copy at your local bookstore or online at Amazon.com. And that wraps up another edition of Need to Know, Rochester's news magazine. I'm your host, Helene Bianduti-Hofer. Thank you for joining me tonight and throughout the weekend on WXXI and online at WXXInews.org. Have a great night.